Welcome to We Need to Name This, where we unpack the hidden curriculum of academe with scholars of color. I'm Laura Ann Jacobs and my co-host,
Ebony Bruce Harvey.
Today's episode is entitled How to Be Strategic with My Time in Academia. We'd like to introduce two amazing Black women scholars, Dr. Christina Morton and Dr. Amber Willis, who will share their experiences with us. But first, we would like to share a little bit about them. Dr. Amber Willis's research focuses on designing and studying practice-based professional learning experiences for pre-service teachers, practicing K-12 mathematics teachers, and teacher educators. Her interests are motivated by a commitment to children and a desire to rehumanize their experiences in schools. She's currently a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Michigan with TeachingWorks. She contributes to their mission by conducting professional developments for in-service teachers, designing and teaching undergraduate mathematics methods courses, and coaching teacher educators to learn and try out practice-based teacher education. Amber is an experienced mathematics teacher and educator with 19 years of experience. She taught middle and high school mathematics in Atlanta, Georgia, Seoul, South Korea, and Miami, Florida. She holds a BS in mathematics education from Oakwood University, an MS in mathematics education from Nova Southeastern University, and a PhD in educational studies specializing in mathematics education from the University of Michigan. Welcome, Amber.
And Dr. Christina Morton is a postdoctoral research fellow at the National Center for Institutional Diversity at the University of Michigan. She earned her doctorate in higher education from the University of Michigan, and her work explores how cultural resources, such as spirituality, contribute to the success of students of color in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, also known as STEM. Christina also creatively blends art and science as she disseminates her work through poetry and storytelling. So we want to welcome you, Dr. Christina Morton. Okay, Ella, you want to get us started on the interview questions?
I would love to. Thank you, Ebony. To start us off, I guess, would you both mind telling us a little bit about yourselves? We learned a little bit about you from bio, but your area of study, your current position, and what brought you to academia.
Yes, of course. Thank you for having me. So I was a former teacher, as you read in my bio, and I taught in two large urban schools in the South. And so I bring a lot of that Southern flavor to my experiences, and I am a teacher at heart in everything that I do. So at the University of Michigan, I studied mathematics education, and currently working as a math research specialist at TeachingWorks. And so what brought me to this work was when I was a teacher, there were a couple of things that really bothered me, but I didn't know what to do and how to change it. And I kind of had hit like a glass ceiling of where I could go currently as a teacher. And so one of those things was that, I didn't like that some of my students had very different experiences solely based off of who their teacher was at that moment or for that particular content area. So they could be in my class thriving and flourishing and doing amazing things, and then go right next door and it's a whole different student, a whole different experience. And I'm like, well, what's happening? And then the second thing that really drove me to graduate school was that, the professional development experiences that we were getting were horrible. And so I just really couldn't figure out, like, how do I make these experiences better so that teachers who want to hone in on their craft and do better and be better for their students and their communities, how do we create experiences for them to learn and develop that were meaningful and that were connected to the work and students that they were actually working with? So that's what drove me to graduate school.
My name is Dr. Christina Morton. My area of study really is the experiences of students of color in STEM fields and the cultural resources that they draw upon to remain resilient and persistent in those fields, particularly spirituality. My current position, I am a postdoctoral research fellow with the National Center for Institutional Diversity at the University of Michigan. And what brought me to academia really was this love of learning. I remember when I was in about 8th or 9th grade, I heard someone speak, and it was a Black woman, and she was pursuing her PhD. And she said, a PhD is a terminal degree. What do you all think terminal means? And so we're like, I don't know. And she was like, it is as far as you can go. Like, this is the last degree you will need for your particular field or discipline. And I remember thinking when I heard that, that is so cool. How powerful and amazing is it to kind of reach, this end of a road, and see how far it can take you. And so I think probably from that moment forward, I was like, how do I get a PhD? How do I get to be an academic? And even though at that time I didn't know what I was going to study or what I wanted to learn more about, but I was so excited about learning itself that I felt like whatever it takes to get there, I'm going to have to do it. So that was kind of an early beginning for me in terms of thinking about PhD programs, doctoral education, all of that.
So graduate school is not easy, right? And so you're in a program for 5 to 8 years, honing your craft, right? And you've been teaching, and you have done a lot of teaching. So you not only taught children, but you've also taught adults. You've also taught professionals, right? And so having to do all of that work, and then also like balance, going to school, your spirituality, your mental health, your social relationships, your emotional well-being. How do you balance all of that with the responsibilities of training teachers, getting your own degree, also researching, right? Doing professional development. And also, you all don't know, but Homegirl flies all over the country training teachers. So how do you balance all of those things, with all the responsibilities that you have?
Let me tell you, the first thing I did when I hit the ground in Ann Arbor, Michigan, was I had to find me a church family. Okay, I knew first thing was that my faith and my connection with God had to be strong if I was going to take on this mountain of an experience of graduate school. So I found a local church community. I joined like the Adventist Christian Fellowship with other students and graduate students. And I knew that I needed to be centered in that so that my mental and my social and my spiritual connections could all be strong. And so to me, that was important in my experience as a grad student and currently as a postdoc. Another thing I had to do was I needed to like surround myself with people who were love on me and support me and push me and were like-minded and wouldn't let me give up and would let me just vent and be myself. And I just think that having a circle of friends and colleagues who were just so important, like people who are just going to cheer you on at every milestone of the experience is just so important. And so to me, to balance it all out, I had to be strong in my faith, but I also had to have a community that was strong in supporting me and that I could participate in supporting them as well.
When I think about my graduate experience, something that really stands out to me was a piece of advice that I got from Dr. Kelly Slay, who was an advanced student in my doctoral program while I was studying. And she said, this PhD, this is a spiritual experience. And so when you think about it like that, it kind of shifts how you approach your work, how you think about challenges and stumbling blocks and all of those sorts of things. And so when she told me that, I remember feeling like, something clicked. I wanted my doctoral experience to be a spiritual one where I, could see different challenges, different opportunities from that perspective and allow those things, those lessons, and at times what I perceived that could have been failures or difficulties to mold me and to really allow me to become the person that God wanted me to be. And so taking that piece of advice, I ran with it. I completely ran with it. And as far as finding balance, it was really about, okay, how can I pursue opportunities that are going to feed me spiritually? How can I do work that fulfills me spiritually? How can I spend my time in a way that edifies me spiritually? And when I began to think about those decisions in that way, everything changed. I remember feeling anxious and at times insecure and full of doubt as far as, if I don't take this one opportunity, is it going to ruin my career? If I mess up and make a mistake, then is it going to ruin my future or things like that? But from a spiritual perspective, it's, if I take this path, if this door is opened to me, I'm going to learn something. Something good is going to come of it, even if it doesn't feel good at the time, even if I don't fully understand why I'm taking this path. Something good is going to come of it, right? And so having that mindset, it didn't feel like every decision was, do or die. It made me feel as if I had, protection, help, guidance, support. And I began to see the people around me differently as well, right? Instead of thinking about who's my competition, it became, how can I help others and receive help as I need it and at the appropriate time. And so, that one piece of advice, it changed everything for me. And I think balance, or, as well as you can, right? Balance sometimes can seem idyllic or unrealistic when you're in a PhD program and you have deadlines or conference proposals or papers and different things that you've got going on. It's like, oh, what balance? But it allowed me to feel like, okay, if the things that I'm doing are meaningful, if they matter, and if it's all leading me closer to my purpose, then if it takes me a little longer to work on this particular paper or proposal or my dissertation or whatever the case may be, that's fine. And then when there's time to rest, I will rest. And when it's time to go to work again, I'll go to work. But I'll have energy and motivation that comes from that strong sense of purpose and calling to what I'm doing.
So that gives me 2 follow-up questions for you.
Okay.
1, how did you find your church community? And 2, how did you find your friends and colleagues that became your community every day in school and work and stuff like that?
Right. So before I even came to Michigan, I was living in Miami, Florida. And I tell you, I went on Google and I was like, where the church people at in Ann Arbor, Michigan? And I Googled it and I was looking at all the churches. And I even noticed that when I went to the University of Michigan website and like student groups, I noticed they had a whole list of faith-based student groups. And I was like, whoop, there it is right there. And I literally just showed up one day to like a church group. And I was just like, hi, my name's Amber. I'm starting graduate school in a couple weeks. And they were like, come on in, let me feed you and let me love on you and let me introduce you to all these amazing people. And that's basically how it went. I just kind of like figured out what the scene was like, who are the people that I knew that I needed to be around. And I just placed myself in that space.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what about your community at school? So I know that you have a wonderful community of
Yes.
scholars of color. How did you meet them? How did you build connections with them? Because, when you first enter graduate school, you don't really know, especially when you're moving across the country. You don't really know. You're usually moving to a state where you don't have family. You don't have friends, you don't have any kind of roots. And so how did you kind of create those roots and how did you build that community at school also?
That's a great question. So when I came in, my cohort was like 27 people. It was a very large cohort of people. And I was the only one that looked like me. I was the only Black woman in my cohort. And so I was just like, okay. And so there were a couple people in that year that I like made really fantastic connections. But let me tell you, I noticed in the next cohort, there were 2 other Black women who were joining. And I was like, oh, y'all about to be my best friends. I'm about to find you, seek you out, get to know you. And it was just kind of like me, like every year, just kind of like looking for people who I thought would be, you know, great friends, and like just kind of like putting myself out there and just inviting them to lunch or inviting them to coffee, and let's get to know each other. And right after a couple of years, it was just like a circle, you know, like I would say one of my circle of friends are just wonderful women of color who, you know, we would get together. We started this like annual, like every time a new group of people would come in, we'd start and we'd have like a little happy hour or dinner. And just so for me, I knew that I couldn't do this by myself. You know, like I didn't want stereotype threat. I didn't want all the doubts and fears to creep in. So I needed to surround myself with a community. And, you know, my first year, one of my dearest friends, Charles Wilkes, and, you know, like Nick, and just like a lot of great people that were there. But then you also had to find like different pockets and different circles of people. So I just kept finding like all these different circles of people that I could be a part of, that I knew would be good for my soul and good for my whole well-being.
Yeah. So you all know I was one of those new people that you pulled in for.
We have to be friends, like, girl.
You need to come, get to know other Black women. And I'm like, yes, please. Let me learn. Let me know. Teach me your ways. So
yes,
it was definitely great to have folks who just reached out to say, hey, like you're new. We see you. Come break bread with us. So you know, it's really wonderful. So if you are a graduate student of color and you've been there for a while and you see other students coming in, it means so much when you reach out to them, especially when they're new and they're not familiar. So I want to say thank you, Amber.
Of course.
And I'm going to pass it off to Laura Ann for the next question.
Yeah. Well, we thank you for sharing about, you know, your experience in connecting and finding community in graduate school. I know that's like it can be such a isolating experience, like as Ebony was saying, moving across the country where you don't know anybody, you're living in a new place and trying to find community. It's so hard. So I appreciate you sharing like the ways that you reached out to connect, and Ebony also for you saying like, you know, current grad students, y'all got work to do, right?
Yes.
Support, right? And there's so much joy in that conversation. So I appreciate that. So I would like to ask you how long, well, it's kind of a weird question, I guess. How long were you planning to stay in academia? Like when you started grad school, you know, we were talking before we started recording, like, I didn't know what a postdoc was. I didn't know that was a thing, right? I didn't even know there are different types of professorship. I just thought you were one, right? Assistant, associate, full, what's the difference, right? So how long when you started, maybe were you planning to stay in academia? Did you have to shift or reconsider your plans at times? And if so, you know, how did you decide that and when, you know?
Yeah, great question. It's not a weird question. Like I came in because I'm such a like go-getter achiever. I'm like, I'm about to be in this for 4 years. I'm going to graduate in 4 years and I'm about to be out. I don't know why people take 10 years to graduate from graduate school. And you know, after year 3, you're on track. But for me, it took longer than 4 years, but it was because I got this really wonderful professional opportunity with my graduate student job that I had at University of Michigan, and it was to co-direct a large project in California with teacher educators, and it was a 3-year project. And for me, it felt right to extend my time as a graduate student because the experience that I was going to gain as being a part of this project was immeasurable. It was something that I couldn't have paid for, and it was like on the job training, and I felt comfortable learning it under this bubble of being a graduate student, knowing I had this really wonderful, cushy safety net, than having to go out in the real world after graduate school and try to like do it and have like these extra pressure. So for me, I extended my time as a graduate student a few years longer because I really wanted to invest in this program and learn as much as I could and combine it with what I was doing as my research. And it absolutely shifted my plans. Like I came into graduate student school with just the with just the goal of being a teacher educator. I wanted to teach teachers.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that this world of teaching teachers is much bigger than what I, first imagined. And so now what has shifted my ideas is now I want to coach and consult and teach teacher educators. So I wanted to go now from my program that I got to participate in, I now know there's a whole other layer of work out there. So I wanted to make a big impact by affecting the people, by affecting teachers. Because I thought if I could teach 30 teacher educators at a time, and those teacher educators go out into classrooms, those teachers go into classrooms, then I'm affecting all of those classrooms. So I'm like multiplying my impact. But then I learned I can do that much more in an exponential way by working and coaching teacher educators who teach teachers who then go out and teach kids. And so that has shifted my whole playbook for myself and what I really want to do and how I make decisions about the choices I make about what opportunities I'm involved in now.
I think that's a really interesting question. I think right now, because I recently earned my PhD, I graduated in summer of 2020. I feel like I'm very much so at the beginning of my career. So I don't think I have any plans about, when I'm going to stop, because I haven't fully started yet in my mind. I think that I want to see what opportunities are available to me. I want to know what doors are going to be opened in this area, because I've been working toward that goal of earning my PhD for so long that, that moment when, the ceiling becomes the floor, right? You earn your doctorate, you finish, you've run the race, but then in some ways you're also kind of starting from the beginning again, because once you finish, it's like, okay, what's next? But I'm excited about the promise of what's next, what's going to come after I complete my postdoc, and, what positions might be available and what work that I'll continue to do in this area. So I'm looking forward to seeing where this doctorate leads me and working out this pretty new credential.
Thank you. I know Ebony asked about balancing your personal and professional life, and I'm going to kind of shift to balance within your professional life a little bit too. So maybe it's as a graduate student or as a postdoc now. How do you balance research, teaching, and service?
Not very well. I'll tell you that much, to be honest. So I definitely spent most of my graduate and most of my postdoc in the practice, in the practice side of the work that we do, and less in the research side. And I think somehow I found my comfort and my happy place in the work that I was doing, and I didn't spend enough time in the research part. But that doesn't mean that I'm not actively trying to balance that out, but it is difficult because I think we kind of gravitate to the things that we love and that we know how to do really well. And so I wish if I could tell Amber 4 or 5 years ago, give her some advice, I would tell her to push herself out of that comfort zone and to dig more into things that were uncomfortable or that were new and a little bit scary. But the research experience I got has been fantastic, but I do wish I had did a little bit more work. Or even now I'm like, okay, after this call, I need to go work on my research to kind of balance that out for the day. But it is easy to get a little bit of unbalanced in that area if you don't stay on top of it and stay conscious about it.
So while I was in my doctoral program, my funding was really coming from my work as a research assistant. And so in my department, I worked with a faculty member to conduct research related to her areas of interest. And I think that when you're in graduate school, every project that you're on feels, this is super important because, this might lead to a publication, or this might allow me to present at a conference, or, get me closer to, really understanding what this field is about and establishing myself as a professional. And, I think that when I first started engaging in research, it seemed that every task that was asked of me, I needed to, exceed expectations, go above and beyond, because, this could be a make or break moment. But as I said before, thinking about my spirituality and my faith, I began to give myself some grace. And then as I began to do that, I realized that other people will give you grace also. I remember thinking, my research advisor never asked me to be perfect. I was demanding that of myself, I think early on in my doctoral program experience. But that's so unrealistic, and those pressures can feel external, but they might be stemming from internally. And I came into a doctoral program because I needed to learn. I wanted to learn. And so making mistakes and growing and developing was all kind of part of that. And I think that when my mindset went that way, like, you're not expected to be perfect, you're going to make mistakes. And if you need more time to do something, or if you work on a particular aspect of a project and it doesn't turn out the way that you expected, all of that is okay. And then it allowed me to reapproach the work with a better energy and spirit and enthusiasm, because it was like, okay, this isn't make it or break it, you'll figure it out. And I think that when it came to the time when I was teaching in my doctoral program, I was trying to seek out different opportunities to get some teaching experience before I graduated. I think that I chose intentionally a time where I could devote more energy toward teaching. I think that it was a period in my doctoral program where, I had just finished my dissertation proposal. And so I was, getting into the early stages of thinking about my dissertation study and how I was going to execute that. And my research load on my team was lighter than because I was expected to work on my dissertation. I had already gotten out of coursework at that period. And so when it came to thinking about teaching, I was like, okay, this could be a sweet spot where I can really think about my pedagogy, and I could, be intentional about the time that I can offer my students and what exactly I'll be doing. And I think that the timing was right for that teaching opportunity for me. I knew that I wanted to put more time into it, so it made sense. It made sense then. But I will say that a valuable lesson I gained from that experience was, when you think about your time, even if you imagine like, oh, I've got some of these things on the back burner, so I could really devote my attention and focus to this, you will find that whatever you're devoting your attention and focus to can become a really huge thing. And I remember that particular semester I was teaching, it felt like all of my time was going into teaching. And I'm glad that it was at a point in my graduate program where that was possible. But I think if I could go back again, I probably would have been more intentional about, yes, you could put some of these things on the back burner, but should you? What could I have been doing toward my dissertation at that point, or reading or working on that, would have set me up a little bit better for the spring semester when I was, primarily focused on my dissertation as opposed to teaching. I think that would have been helpful. But, thankfully I had the space and opportunity to do that. And I was planful enough in the beginning that I could think about my teaching and focus on it wholeheartedly when I did. But yeah, I think that lesson kind of applies to anything. If you say, oh, I can push this to the back burner, let me focus on X. X could become overwhelming. It could become all-consuming. So kind of putting some of those boundaries in place so that doesn't happen, I think would allow you to have more balance. But that's a lesson learned. So hopefully whoever is watching this will learn from my mistakes, which are good things. Mistakes are good things as long as lessons come from them. And as far as my service, when I was in my doctoral program, I felt like I had a lot of service commitments. And that, could be for a variety of reasons, endeavors or initiatives that I was extremely passionate about, that I wanted to be involved in. I wanted to have a seat at the table to help advocate for students. I wanted to be in a position where I could speak with administrators or faculty members about what was going on in my department and at the school at large, and feel like, I had a hand in helping to affect real change. And I think that's the primary reason why I may have had a lot of service commitments. And then when people begin to see that, then you get tapped for certain things and people call on you, if there's a round table around diversity at the school, or if there's a panel or a conversation or a committee, people begin to hear your name and call it more frequently. And I would say, in talking with other Black women in particular who had been in similar positions, I remember someone told me there will always be someone next in line, right? It doesn't always have to be you. If you say no, if you decide that you don't have the capacity to work on whatever someone is asking of you, they have someone else also in mind. And that could be a good opportunity for that other person, but there's no reason for you to feel guilt or obligation. And so I began to think about the things that I accepted or decided to do. If guilt or obligation was the driving force behind me doing it, then it probably wasn't the best idea. But if that sense of urgency and that desire to, help affect change, and to, when I really felt as if my voice was helpful or needed, then, it didn't feel burdensome or overwhelming. But, there were definitely times when I know that I was overextended in my doctoral program. I know that I was overcommitted because that sense of urgency may have been a little too much, and maybe my focus on allowing someone to come up and step into those roles. Maybe I wasn't as attentive to that voice. But I think that came with time, and experience. You never quite know how much energy, effort, time a particular commitment will be until you really get into it. But a valuable lesson I also learned was asking those types of questions on the front end. So if a mentor or a faculty member said, "Oh, Christina, you would be perfect for this committee or this initiative. We really need someone with your perspective," the first question I was asking was, well, what's the time commitment that you're estimating? Whether it's monthly or weekly, how many hours about are you thinking for this? Other considerations other people might want to think about is, will it be compensated? Will you be compensated for your time and energy that you're spending devoting to this particular thing when you have other things that you could or should be working on? Or who will also be involved in this initiative or this effort that we're doing? Because something else a person once told me was, there are going to be times where you say yes, and it is a lot of work, it is a lot of energy, it is a lot of effort, but is it getting you closer to where you want to be? Like, is this experience going to help you get where you ultimately want to be in the future? So some of the committee work and some of the things that I said yes to when I was in my PhD program, a part of it was I knew that I would learn, and it would be valuable preparation for me if I were to become a faculty member at another institution. So sitting on a committee that determines who receives grants for their research and scholarship, or the committee for faculty search, or doctoral students, doctoral student admissions, all of those things were valuable to me in seeing what the work of a faculty member would be like. And I'm grateful for those experiences. So it didn't always feel balanced, but thinking about, okay, do I feel a sense of purpose in doing this? Is this something that I can learn from that'll be valuable to me in the long run? Or, is this something that, I feel like I should just be a part and I have the capacity to do it? Those were some of the questions I would ask that would allow me to say yes or no to different opportunities that came about.
So tell us a little bit about being a postdoc. So we do have we have an episode that talks about being a postdoc. But
Yeah.
since you are also a postdoc, I think it's really good to hear from different postdocs, because usually that's an experience that we don't hear from. We just don't know about it. We just know about professors, right? So if you could just tell us a little bit about your postdoc, what you're doing, and how you're trying to balance that research, service, and teaching to prepare you for the next step where you have to further balancing.
Right. Yeah, so my postdoc is, there are different types of postdocs, and my postdoc is less of a research postdoc and more of a practice postdoc. So the work that I do in my work as a postdoc is I do consulting and coaching for different universities around the country. And that postdoc has allowed me to continue to hone my craft as a coach, as a consultant, and think about what the work looks like in nonprofit or academic adjacent organizations. But what's great about a postdoc is you still have space to work on your own research, work on your own publications, kind of give yourself a little bit of a jump start before you go into an academic job or a job outside of academia. And then my postdoc is really great because it allows me to have continue learning. And so what my supervisors of my postdoc, they allow me to do is to join in on particular experiences that I'm interested in, like whether it's proposing new projects of work or working with different stakeholders and learning how to navigate particular meetings or to hone my leadership skills. I can do that under the umbrella of a postdoc, and know that I can build these skills up so that when I do go off and work in academia or somewhere else, I can say that I've had these opportunities. Because a lot of times when you're looking for jobs, they want you to have experience in doing something. And oftentimes you're like, I just graduated, I'm kind of get this job to get that experience. And what the postdoc allows you to do is to get the experience so that you can say, yes, I've had this experience or that experience. I know how to do these particular things really well. And instead of trying to like gain that experience on the job as you're working it.
And so have you thought about what your next steps are after this postdoc? Oh, let me ask, How many years is your postdoc? Because we talked about 1 year, 2 year postdoc. Sometimes people go from one postdoc to another postdoc.
Yeah.
And so like, what is your plan, or what do you hope to do after this postdoc?
So my postdoc when I signed was a 1-year contract with the option of extending it. And so I do have that option. My postdoc actually ends in August. And so I have that option to extend it. However, at this time, I'm kind of loosely on the job market. So I am entertaining future job opportunities, which is great because you have a little bit of cushion if, what things don't work out in particular ways, you can continue with your postdoc another year. I think I can work my postdoc 2, maybe 3 years if I wanted to, but my hopes is that I find a place to land within the next 6 months to a year. The question of like, what do I want to be when I grow up? That's kind of what's haunting me right now. I am very attracted to these academic adjacent opportunities. Like I said before, consulting and coaching teacher educators, which are professors, is not something that is done everywhere. And so I'm continuing to look for opportunities that will allow me to stay in higher ed and stay connected to academia. Without necessarily being a teacher educator. But I will say I'm not ruling out that opportunity, but it's nice to know that there are other options out there. And I would say like coming to graduate school, that's like the biggest thing that you will learn is that what you thought existed in the world is even greater and broader than what you could have imagined. And coming to graduate school really opens up those ideas and spaces for you to get to know them and learn what's really out there in the world.
Yeah, I never even thought about, you hear about people being educational consultants, and I had no idea as a teacher. I was just like, that's that PD person that comes in and tells us the same thing we already know. That's
right.
What a consultant is. You know what I'm saying? But it's like, oh, when you enter academia, you're like, oh, like there's so many facets to being a consultant. You can consult in higher ed. You can consult with like teachers on the ground. You can help teachers
foundations
with their lesson plans and all that kind of stuff. You can help them, you can help teacher educators, like you were saying, like support teachers. Like there's just so many things that you can do, but it's hard to imagine those things until you you're exposed to them.
Exactly.
Totally right. That's totally right. Laura Ann, did you have a follow-up? Because I didn't want to cut you off if I did before I asked my final question. I was just so excited.
I'm gonna say no, but I do have a question that we might not put in the episode, which is I was wondering, like, we had another interview where people were talking about the division of like research, teaching, and service, and how that's divided up like percentages or time-wise. And then I've heard a lot of people who, so I had been considering, what did you call it? Academic adjacent jobs?
Yeah,
as well.
I love with that term.
I
love it. So I have been considering some of those, and I had been talking to some people about like what that would look like. And a lot of people told me like, well, you just have to make sure you're still doing research while you're doing that so that you can enter academia if you want. I guess my question, which is not particularly glamorous, is if you're not planning to re-enter academia, is that no longer part of the balance that you're working towards, or is it still because you have a desire to contribute your knowledge and your expertise and extend your impact? Or is it something where you're like, no, I mean, I love teaching, I love consulting, so that's where I'm going to put my energy into?
What a great question. And I think that for me, I see value in academia. I see value in it. I understand its place now. I understand why it's necessary in our society and our communities. And for me, it's something that I want the option to come back to at a later point. I think for right now, I'm just on another trajectory. And you're right. I heard the same advice, Lauren, that I need to continue to still publish. And I think for me, taking an academic adjacent job, like a working for an organization or a foundation that's closely connected to a university, is an ideal space for me because it allows me to stay connected to research. It allows me to do my own research because what you don't know is if you're not connected to academia in some sense, it's hard to do research and get grant funding for that research. So for me, I need to stay connected so that I can do my own research, so that I can continue to be abreast of other people's research and attend academic spaces and conferences. But that when I choose to or have that option later, I want to be able to come into academia depending on what my life is like in the future. I'm not ready to give up on the idea of being an academic, but I want to work in the space, but maybe not as a professor just right now, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Thank you. I also heard in your answer, I guess when I've heard this advice from others, it's come across as like kind of self-serving, like keep your options open so you can navigate back in. And like I was like, I don't know. I mean, that's just kind of yucky to me. But you know what I hear from you, Amber, is saying like, you know, keeping up to date with your own research for your own practice, informing yourself, and like being a part of like the community. That's why you continue to do research, even if you're, you know, in an academic adjacent job. So I think that's a fresh perspective for me that I really value. So yeah, thank you.
Because I don't hate it. I don't hate the research. I don't hate being an academic. It's just not what I'm choosing for myself right this moment. And I just want to hang out with my academic friends too. So I'm not ready to let go of them as well. So I think having that opportunity in that space, and you never know how things will turn out in your life or whatever. But I do think that the work that takes place in academia informs my coaching work, informs my consulting work. And I think if I left that behind, I would not be doing my best work with those partners and stakeholders that I'm connected to.
Awesome. Thank you.
So for our final question, we wanted to know how you find time and opportunities to engage in community service or outreach or causes that are important or meaningful to you, because I think you just get so bogged down with so many things you have to do in academia, whether you're taking classes or you're writing or you're meetings and meetings and
more meetings.
More meetings, a million meetings. What? Another meeting?
Right after this meeting, right?
You know, a meeting to talk about the last meeting. I mean,
right.
So with all of that, how do you find time to like really feed your soul? You know?
Yeah, no, that's important. Absolutely, Ebony. I think when I first came to Michigan, I was like, I just trying to stay above float. And I felt like I was empty in the way of community service. And so for me, supporting children, supporting community, supporting families has always been near and dear to my heart. And so, yeah, I might have done like little one-off like Habitat for Humanity or go volunteer or volunteer at the like abused women's shelters and cook breakfast. Like those were like these one-off things, but I was looking for something a little bit more sustainable, something that was like ongoing. So for me, I kind of created my own thing for a little bit. So I knew that there were a lot of single moms in the area, single women who were graduate students, and they had children who were in schools and often were looking for people to support them. So at first I started just tutoring children of single moms in the area in middle school and high school mathematics. And then later I found another organization called Peace Neighborhood Center in Ann Arbor that works primarily with students of color. And I just joined their organization and just started tutoring middle school students after school. And so for me, like I feel like my gift is teaching, and I'm just so blessed to understand mathematics in a way that I can explain it and support young people in understanding it. So I feel like, you know, yeah, I can go and do other things, but I want to support children. I'm a teacher at heart, and I've been so disconnected from children from being in higher ed. So it gave me a way to give back to these communities that I care deeply about, support children and understanding mathematics. And just like, for me, community service is huge. And being a graduate student and coming to Michigan, you'll learn there's so many opportunities. And my biggest advice is don't let the work and the feeling that you don't have enough time to engage in opportunities keep you astray from doing good work in the community. Find those opportunities, seek them out, because yeah, you may be tired at the end of the day, but your soul will feel fed. You will feel good about the work you're doing. And what I learned is it always impacts how you're thinking about your own research as well.
So I think that something that a person told me that I will hold on to forever is, well, you never can find time. You make time. So if it's important to you, don't think that you're going to find time, because it's just going to be harder for you to actually get to what you would like to do. But you have to make time for it. So you have to plan and be intentional. And so when I think about community service or outreach activities or some of those opportunities that I just got involved in because it felt like it was the right thing for me to be doing, I think a lot of that was me deciding I will make time for this. So something that I really valued was getting involved in intergroup dialogue on my campus and helping graduate students, faculty members, high school students, all sorts of folks begin to engage in conversations around social identities, power, privilege, oppression, and facilitating those conversations was a way for me to feel like, okay, I have a hand in helping to be really the change, right, that I wanted to see. People actually engaging in difficult conversation around race, racism, sexism, you name it, and finding a way to find common ground or mutual understanding of each other. That to me felt like very important work. And I made time for it. And, I think that for anyone who has a particular cause or, community service commitments or things that they want to do, make time for that because you will not feel fulfilled or excited about whatever else you happen to be working on if that part of you is being pushed to the side.
Oh, thank you. Such great advice. I feel like we always feel like there's just not enough time to do. And there actually is time. It's how you prioritize, your time. And I
And
think
it's what you hold near and dear to your heart. Children and families and community and schooling is always important to me. And so you just have to you just have to make it happen. Just have to make it happen.
So do you have any advice, just any last words for folks who are thinking about being in academia or in academia, in terms of like finding, making sure that they're fed emotionally, spiritually, physically, etc. Is there any last words that you have to share or advice that you have to give?
Yeah. I will say specifically for people who are thinking about graduate school students who have ever been oppressed, who have ever been marginalized or felt less than, or have felt like society has positioned you that way. Academia is a space that absolutely needs you. The voices, your experiences, your point of view on life is needed in this space. And I feel like you can absolutely do it. So let me tell you that first. Like, if you're thinking about it, you have a story, you have a community that you care deeply about, you have a purpose and a drive. Academia is a space that needs you, and your voice needs and your story needs to be told. I will also say that my advice to you is to do like what you're doing now. Seek out videos, seek out people's opinions, communicate with others, reach out to people because I will be honest, when I came to graduate school, I knew one person with a PhD. Nobody in my family has one. I knew one other person, and I didn't know anybody else in my community who had one. And so this whole place felt foreign to me. But I will say, put yourself out there. Believe in yourself, believe that you are ready, you are capable, you absolutely can do it, and hold on to that. And remind yourself why you're making the choices to step into this arena. You constantly will forget because it is like fast, it is ongoing, and you will constantly doubt yourself. But if you hold on to what's driven you to this place, let that be your driving force, even if you have to write yourself a letter and read it every so often. So that is my advice. And then also I will say there are tons of resources, Facebook pages, social media outlets, organizations who are supporting students of color, supporting graduate students, period. So get in those spaces and connect with those people. And just, if you are a person who has a faith-based background, lean into that, and that will definitely carry you through. It literally dragged me across the finish line.
I would say that for anyone who is considering graduate school, who is thinking that this might be a direction that you want to take in your life, really take a moment to really consider what your values are, those things that are non-negotiable in your life. Maybe it's your faith, maybe it's your family, significant other, relationships with your friends, your exercise, health and wellness, whatever it is in your life that feels non-negotiable. And I would say, write those things down. Write those things down. I would also say, write down your reasons. What is your why? Why is pursuing a graduate degree important to you? Why is it something that you want? What's bringing you there? However big or small it may seem, what is your why? Write that down too. And I would say keep those things in a place where you could easily revisit it and remember it, because when you get into a graduate program, you will have all of these different forces and expectations coming at you that might make you feel like, oh, I need to sacrifice, X, Y, or Z in order to be successful here. And if you can go back to that list and you could go back to those non-negotiables, I'm not sacrificing my health. I'm not sacrificing my family. I'm not sacrificing the things that I love to do that make me who I am in order to survive here. If you can have that, at the ready, I think that that will be a valuable resource to you, not only for your graduate program, but for the rest of your life. And when it comes down to that why, having that readily available to you, I think that that's a strong motivator in those times where you might feel discouraged, where you might feel alone or confused about why you are in this place and you're doing what you're doing, and does it even matter? If you have that why right there and that still stirs something in your spirit, I believe that it'll motivate you to really stay the course. So I would give that advice to anyone. And I would say, talk to graduate students at the institution that you're preparing to go to. Ask them about their experiences. Ask them, what is it that you wish you knew as you were in my position and you were thinking about coming to this school or this program? Tell me, what are some of the challenges that you faced? What are some of the triumphs and successes that you've had here? What made this a good fit for you? Asking those types of questions, I think, will really give you a clear sense of if that's where you need to be. And any other pieces of advice? I would say trust your intuition, trust your instincts. When it was time for me to pursue my graduate degree, I knew it. Like I knew it inside my spirit, inside of myself. I understood that I was ready. And even though I didn't fully understand or know what was coming, I knew that it was the right time for me. And I believe that if you trust that intuition or that instinct within you, your spirit, whatever you want to call it, I think that you'll know when it's the right time for you and the door will be open.
Any last questions, Laura Ann?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. That's wonderful advice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just thank you so much. This was such a great episode. Just I think it's like really important to remind us that we can do it. But it's not only focusing on graduate school. Like we're people outside of graduate school, and like what that looks like, and reminding folks that graduate school is not your whole life. You know what I'm saying? It's a slice, it's a piece. There's so much more that's going on you living for, and to remember that even though graduate school can seem so overwhelming,
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
Life is a sum of your experiences, and graduate school will just be one of those experiences.
Exactly. Yes. Couldn't have been said better.
See, I do that math in there, a sum of. Okay.
Yeah, I see you. I see you.
Thank you for the experience. I hope it was helpful. I hope I said something that was helpful. I feel like I was just rambling.
No,
but
it was good. It was
It's awesome.
awesome.
Thank you for doing this. I mean, honestly, I think it's so legit. I think it's so important. And I'm just happy to be involved. So thank you so much for asking me. And you ladies rock. I just love it.
Thanks so much.
Love it.
Saying that. Well, enjoy your time. I'm looking forward to seeing you soon.
I look forward to being seen. And tell Zeke I said, what's up? Can't wait to hit his little cheeks. And Lauren, good luck tomorrow.
Thank you.
I will say a little prayer for you. And remember, you are smart, you're important, you know your research more than anybody else.
Thank you. I channel all my strength and energy tomorrow. Thank you so much.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah.
Whose research? Your research. All right, let me get out of here.
Later.
All right. Thank you for joining us for We Need to Name This, a series where we unpack the hidden curriculum of academia. Join us for our next episode, Building Community and Creating My Unique Academic Space, with Paulina Frazier and Erin Elliott. For more information, visit www.weneedtonamethis.com.